bought a ranch that no one wanted. The basement door was welded shut. Marcus Chen stood in the musty darkness below his new house, flashlight beam tracing the crude metal seam that sealed the door completely. No handles, no hinges visible. Just solid steel plates fused together with amateur welding work that left burn marks on the concrete walls. Above his head, an industrial exhaust fan the size of a truck tire was bolted into the ceiling. Far too large for any normal ranch basement. Heavy-duty electrical conduits snaked along the walls like veins, feeding power to equipment that had no business existing in residential property. The real estate agent had mentioned storage areas, but this wasn't storage. This was containment. Marcus pressed his ear against the cold metal and heard nothing but his own breathing. Why would someone seal a door from the outside, unless they never wanted anyone to get back in? The previous owners had left in a hurry 3 months ago, according to the paperwork. Left behind furniture, tools, even family photos. People don't abandon their lives unless something forces them to run. Marcus Chen had purchased the 300-acre spread in eastern Colorado for $60,000. A price so low it should have triggered immediate suspicion. But suspicion was exactly what Marcus was trying to escape. 6 months earlier, his career as an EPA environmental inspector had ended in disgrace when internal politics and bureaucratic pressure forced him to approve a questionable chemical permit. The fallout destroyed his reputation and left him seeking refuge far from Washington's corridors of power. This remote ranch seemed perfect for starting over, even if the isolation meant the nearest neighbor lived 8 miles away through rough terrain. The basement itself told a strange story. Most ranch houses in this area had simple root cellars or minimal foundation space, but this basement was larger than necessary and equipped with industrial-grade ventilation systems. Heavy-duty exhaust fans were mounted in the ceiling, their motors still functional despite years of disuse. The concrete floor showed stains that household cleaning products couldn't explain, dark patches that seemed to have soaked deep into the foundation itself. Marcus climbed the wooden stairs and emerged into his kitchen, where unpacked boxes surrounded a folding table that served as his temporary dining area. Through the window, he could see the vast expanse of prairie grass stretching toward distant mountains, a view that should have been peaceful, but felt somehow watchful. The previous owners, according to county records, were the Morrison family, who had operated the ranch for 12 years before their sudden departure. Their departure coincided with the closure of a mining operation 15 miles to the west. Though Marcus couldn't determine if the two events were connected, the welded door bothered him more than he wanted to admit. During his EPA career, Marcus had investigated enough environmental crimes to recognize the signs of deliberate concealment. Companies that had something to hide often went to extreme lengths to eliminate evidence, and amateur welding on a basement door suggested panic rather than professional cleanup. Tomorrow he would drive into the nearest town and ask questions about the Morrison family and their hasty exit. But tonight, he would try to ignore the sealed door and focus on unpacking his new life. Dawn broke gray and cold across the Colorado plains as Marcus loaded his truck for the 40-minute drive to Millfield, the closest town with more than a gas station and a post office. The ranch felt different in daylight, less ominous but somehow more isolated, surrounded by endless grassland that showed no signs of neighboring properties or human activity. He had spent a restless night thinking about the welded door and the Morrison family's abrupt departure. Questions that demanded answers only local residents could provide. Millfield's main street consisted of 12 buildings, half of which appeared abandoned or barely operational. Marcus parked outside the veterinary clinic, a converted house with a hand-painted sign that read, Elena Vasquez, DVM. The woman who answered his knock was younger than he expected, perhaps 40, with intelligent dark eyes and calloused hands that suggested she worked with large animals rather than pampered pets. "You must be the new owner of the Morrison place," Elena said before Marcus could introduce himself. "Word travels fast in small towns. I'm Elena Vasquez. 60,000 for 300 acres, right? That price is practically a donation. Around here, people are saying nobody would touch that land, even at that price." Marcus Chen, "I was hoping you might know something about the previous owners. They left behind quite a bit of property, and I'm trying to understand why they departed so quickly." Elena's expression shifted subtly, becoming more guarded. The Morrisons were good people who ran into bad luck. Sometimes that's all there is to it. But Marcus had spent years reading people during environmental investigations, and Elena's careful phrasing suggested she knew more than she was willing to share immediately. What kind of bad luck? Financial problems? Family issues? Their livestock started dying, Elena said after a long pause. Cattle first, then the horses. I performed necropsies on several animals, but the symptoms didn't match any known diseases or poisoning patterns I could identify. The losses mounted quickly, and insurance wouldn't cover mysterious deaths without clear causation. Marcus felt a familiar chill of recognition. During his EPA career, unexplained animal deaths often indicated environmental contamination, particularly when multiple species were affected simultaneously. Did you save tissue samples for additional testing? I did, but the lab results were inconclusive. Heavy metals within acceptable ranges, no obvious toxins, no bacterial or viral agents. Whatever killed those animals wasn't something standard veterinary tests could detect. Elena stepped aside and gestured for Marcus to enter her clinic. There's something else you should know about your property. The Morrison Ranch sits directly downhill from the old Blackwood mining operation. They extracted rare earth metals until about 4 months ago, when federal inspectors shut them down for permit violations. The timing wasn't coincidental. It dawned on Marcus that the Morrison family's departure, the mining closure, and his own arrival were all connected by circumstances he didn't yet understand. Elena's clinic smelled of antiseptic and animal medicines, but something in her manner suggested she had been waiting for someone like him to ask the right questions. Those permit violations, Marcus said carefully. Do you know what specific regulations Blackwood mining violated? Elena walked to a filing cabinet and removed a thick folder. Environmental dumping, improper waste disposal, and something about unauthorized underground storage that the federal inspectors couldn't fully document before the company sealed their operations. Elena spread the contents of the folder across her desk, revealing federal inspection reports, correspondence from the EPA, and photographs of industrial equipment. The underground storage facility was discovered by accident when one of their excavators broke through into an existing tunnel system. Blackwood Mining claimed they had no knowledge of previous underground construction on their property, but the inspectors found evidence of recent chemical activity. Marcus studied the photographs, his trained eye recognizing the telltale signs of improper hazardous waste management, industrial drums, corroded piping, and concrete structures that showed chemical burn patterns. These tunnels, how extensive were they? According to the inspector's preliminary report, they connected multiple properties in the area. The tunnel system was more sophisticated than anything that should exist in rural Colorado, with reinforced concrete walls and industrial-grade ventilation systems. Elena pointed to a survey map that showed the underground network. Look at this elevation chart. The tunnels slope downward from the mining site, following the natural water table toward lower elevations. Marcus felt his stomach drop as he realized the implications. His property sat at the lowest point in the immediate area, making it a natural collection point for anything flowing through underground channels. The basement with its oversized ventilation system suddenly made perfect sense if it had been designed to handle chemical vapors or contaminated airflow. Elena, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Did the Morrison Ranch basement have any unusual features? Industrial equipment that didn't belong on a cattle operation? Elena's hesitation confirmed his suspicions before she spoke. Tom Morrison asked me to examine his basement about 6 months ago. He was concerned about strange odors and worried about air quality affecting his family's health. What I found down there looked more like a chemical processing facility than ranch storage. Professional-grade exhaust systems, chemical-resistant floor drains, and a sealed door that Tom said had been welded shut when they purchased the property 12 years earlier. The pieces were falling into place with terrible clarity. Marcus realized that his property hadn't been chosen randomly by whoever had operated the underground facility. The Morrison Ranch served as the endpoint for whatever materials flowed down from the mining operation, and the basement had been converted into some kind of containment or processing center. Who sold you that folder of inspection reports? Marcus asked. I didn't buy them. They were delivered anonymously to my clinic 3 weeks ago, along with a note suggesting that new property owners in the area might need this information. Elena's voice dropped to almost a whisper. Someone wanted these documents preserved and distributed, but they were too afraid to do it openly. Before Marcus could respond, his phone rang. The caller ID showed an unknown number with a Colorado area code. When he answered, a smooth male voice spoke with the confidence of someone accustomed to getting immediate attention. Mr. Chen, this is Robert Blackwood. I understand you've recently purchased property in our area. I'd like to schedule a meeting to discuss some matters of mutual concern regarding your new ranch. There are certain historical complications that require careful handling, and I believe we can reach an arrangement that benefits everyone involved. Marcus ended the call without agreeing to meet Blackwood, but the man's confident tone suggested he wasn't someone accustomed to being refused. Elena watched Marcus carefully as he set his phone down on her desk, her expression growing increasingly concerned. Robert Blackwood doesn't make social calls, Elena said. If he's reaching out personally, it means you've already discovered something that threatens his interests. The fact that he knew you were here, in my clinic, means he's been watching your movements since you arrived. Marcus felt the familiar weight of being monitored that had plagued his final months at the EPA. Corporate interests always kept tabs on regulatory officials who posed potential problems, and apparently his reputation had followed him to Colorado. How much do you know about Blackwood's operation before it was shut down? More than I should, and less than I need to prove anything. Elena pulled out a detailed geological survey map. Blackwood Mining extracted rare earth metals using a process that required enormous quantities of chemical solvents. The official operation processed material at their main facility, but there were always rumors about secondary processing sites that weren't included in their environmental permits. Elena traced her finger along the underground tunnel system marked on the survey. These tunnels weren't naturally occurring. Someone excavated them deliberately to connect the main mining site with at least 4 other properties in the area, including yours. The engineering required significant expertise and funding, which suggests this wasn't some small-scale illegal operation. Marcus studied the map more closely and realized that the tunnel system formed a sophisticated network for moving materials without surface transportation that could be monitored by federal agencies. If they were processing materials underground and using these tunnels for distribution, the basement in my house could have been a collection and storage facility for concentrated chemicals. That would explain the industrial ventilation systems and the chemical-resistant floor drains I found, Elena agreed. But it would also mean that whatever is behind that welded door represents evidence of major environmental crimes. The kind of evidence that could send people to prison for decades. Marcus's phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed his former supervisor at the EPA, Director Patricia Walsh. The timing couldn't be coincidental. The EPA maintained monitoring protocols for former employees who had handled sensitive environmental cases, especially when they appeared in federal watch areas. He answered with growing apprehension. Marcus, I've received some concerning information about your current location. Federal investigators are actively monitoring Blackwood mining operations in Colorado, and your presence there has triggered security protocols. You need to understand that this situation involves ongoing criminal investigations that could put you in serious danger. What kind of criminal investigations? Marcus asked, though he was beginning to suspect the answer. Environmental terrorism charges. Blackwood Mining stands accused of deliberately contaminating multiple watersheds across Colorado and Wyoming. They used underground networks to hide evidence and eliminate witnesses who might testify against them. The Justice Department believes they're still operating illegally, despite the official shutdown of their mining permits. Marcus looked at Elena, who had obviously overheard enough of the conversation to understand the implications. The steel barrier in his basement wasn't just hiding evidence of environmental crimes. It was concealing proof of systematic criminal activity that reached far beyond simple permit violations. Patricia, I think I may have found their primary evidence storage facility. My property contains an underground chamber that connects to their tunnel network, and there are signs of recent chemical activity. The silence on the phone lasted long enough that Marcus wondered if the call had dropped. When Director Walsh finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of federal authority mixed with genuine fear. Marcus, you need to leave that location immediately. Blackwood has eliminated people who posed far less threat than you do right now. Marcus drove back to his ranch with Director Walsh's warnings echoing in his mind. But fear had been replaced by professional determination. Running away wouldn't eliminate the environmental contamination that was probably poisoning the local water supply, and his EPA training had taught him that corporate criminals counted on intimidation to silence potential whistleblowers. Helena had insisted on accompanying him, bringing veterinary tools that could help analyze any chemical evidence they might discover. Her decision to stay involved despite the obvious danger suggested that the contamination had affected more local residents than just the Morrison family. Before we attempt to open that door, we need to prepare for what we might find inside, Elena said as they stood in Marcus's basement. If this chamber was used for chemical storage or processing, There could be toxic vapors, corrosive substances, or radioactive materials that require protective equipment. Marcus had brought industrial fans from his truck to ensure proper ventilation, and Elena had acquired respiratory masks and chemical-resistant gloves from her veterinary supplies. The welded seams on the door showed amateur craftsmanship, suggesting whoever had sealed it was working quickly under pressure rather than following professional containment protocols. Using a reciprocating saw borrowed from Elena's clinic, Marcus began cutting through the welded metal plates. The work progressed slowly due to the thickness of the steel and the need to avoid damaging whatever lay beyond. After 40 minutes of careful cutting, a section of metal fell away to reveal darkness beyond. The smell that emerged from the opening confirmed Marcus's worst fears: chemical residues, metallic corrosion, and the unmistakable odor of industrial solvents that had been sealed in an enclosed space for months. Elena aimed her flashlight through the opening, illuminating a chamber that extended far deeper into the earth than the main basement. "This isn't just a storage room," Elena said, her voice muffled by the respiratory mask. "Look at the construction. Reinforced concrete walls, industrial lighting fixtures, and drainage systems designed for heavy chemical use." Marcus widened the opening until he could step through into the hidden chamber. The space was larger than his entire house, with ceiling heights that suggested excavation equipment had been used during construction. Along the walls, metal shelving held dozens of containers labeled with chemical formulations he recognized from his EPA work. Concentrated acids, rare metal extraction solvents, and several substances that were strictly regulated by federal environmental laws. But the most disturbing discovery was a series of detailed maps showing the underground tunnel network Elena had mentioned. These weren't survey maps drawn by engineering firms. They were hand-drawn operational guides showing the locations of chemical injection points, underground storage tanks, and connection tunnels that linked at least 8 different properties across the region. The implication hit him that the Morrison Ranch hadn't been randomly selected by Blackwood Mining. His property sat at the center of a sophisticated underground operation designed to process and distribute hazardous materials without detection by federal monitoring systems. The sealed barrier had been welded shut to hide evidence that could expose the entire criminal network. Elena pointed to a filing cabinet near the back of the chamber. "Those documents might contain the proof federal investigators need to prosecute everyone involved in this operation." Marcus approached the cabinet and found it unlocked, which struck him as deliberate rather than careless. Someone had wanted these files accessible for eventual discovery. The documents inside contained contracts, chemical analysis reports, and correspondence that implicated Blackwood Mining in systematic environmental crimes across multiple states. As Marcus read through the files, his stomach twisted with recognition. His own signature appeared on several EPA approval documents from 18 months earlier, permits he had been pressured to approve despite questionable environmental impact assessments. He understood now why Blackwood had been watching him. He wasn't just a potential whistleblower, he was a former accomplice whose testimony could either destroy them or validate their defense strategy. Marcus and Elena spent the next hour photographing documents and chemical containers with their phones, creating digital evidence that could survive if the physical materials were destroyed. The files revealed a criminal network that extended across 5 states, involving shell companies, bribed officials, and systematic environmental destruction that had been covered up for years. As they worked, Marcus became increasingly aware of sounds from the tunnel system beyond the hidden chamber. Subtle vibrations in the concrete walls suggested movement in the underground passages, though it could have been groundwater flow or settling earth. Elena noticed his unease and gestured for silence while she listened carefully to the walls. "There's definitely something moving through those tunnels," she whispered. "The sound pattern isn't consistent with water or natural settling. It's more like machinery or vehicles." The realization that they weren't alone in the underground network sent adrenaline through Marcus's system. Someone was using the tunnels while they gathered evidence, which meant their presence in the chamber had probably been detected. He quickly gathered the most incriminating documents and stuffed them into a waterproof bag Elena had brought from her veterinary supplies. A new sound echoed through the chamber, the distant rumble of heavy engines approaching through the main tunnel system. The noise grew steadily louder, accompanied by the metallic clank of machinery that suggested industrial equipment rather than standard vehicles. Marcus realized they had minutes at most before whoever was coming reached their location. "We need to get out of here immediately," Marcus said, but Elena was already moving toward the chamber entrance. The opening they had cut through the steel barrier would reveal their presence to anyone who entered the basement, making concealment impossible. As they climbed through the opening into Marcus's basement, the sound of engines grew close enough to vibrate the floor beneath their feet. Marcus quickly arranged boxes and tools to partially obscure the hole they had cut, though anyone looking closely would notice the fresh metal shavings and altered appearance of the barrier. They emerged from the basement into Marcus's kitchen just as headlights swept across the front windows of the house. 3 large vehicles were approaching down the ranch's access road, moving slowly and deliberately rather than racing toward an emergency. The lead vehicle appeared to be a modified industrial truck equipped with drilling or excavation equipment. Elena peered through the window blinds and identified the vehicles as belonging to Blackwood Mining, recognizable by their corporate logos and specialized equipment configurations. They're not here for a friendly visit. Those trucks are designed for underground construction work, which means they're planning to access the tunnel system through your property. Marcus realized that Blackwood's operation hadn't been completely shut down by federal investigators.